Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the E.N.G. Media Podcast. Today, we have a very exciting guest, Shannon Scott, the CEO of HR Logix. For those of you just joining the podcast, I am Christian Gannon, co founder of E.N.G. Media, and we specialize in helping software and tech companies scale their revenue. So, if you want to learn how to take your software tech business to the next level, make sure to stick around. So I understand HR Logix was founded with a clear mission to give employers trustworthy, scalable solutions to complex regulatory challenges. Your platform combines advanced technology and expert-led managed services to help HR teams manage the entire employee lifecycle, from Form I-9 and E-Verify to hiring incentives, ACA reporting, verification services, and unemployment cost control. My first question for you, and I'd love to start with the big picture, is for those who may not know who HR Logix is yet, could you share a little bit about what you guys do, the problems you're solving, and the role that you have in the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be on. I appreciate the opportunity. And that was a mouthful, so you did really well trying to introduce all those things that we do. Um, yeah, the best way to really describe what we do is anything that can get you in trouble with the IRS, Department of Labor, state unemployment agencies. There's a big world surrounding compliance, and compliance is a very broad term in general. We believe kind of in the use of labor, and technology, and kind of allowing HR departments to kind of focus on the human side of things and let the legal stuff and the compliance stuff, be outsourced to companies who have the years of experience and technology to be able to make sure they're maintaining compliance. Rules and regulations change on a daily basis, not only federally, but HR departments deal with federal, state, local, county regulations. It's almost an impossible task, especially if you're, trying to manage an HR department of any, mid to large size organization where these rules are constantly changing. So, the way I look at it is, you don't go to a dentist if your foot hurts, right? They're both doctors, right? But they specialize in what they specialize in. And what we do is we take all of that legal and headache of the compliance part of, am I doing this right, out of the HR teams and put the emphasis on us, and we take all the liability for it.
That's awesome. And I actually had a follow-up question. You actually segmented it perfect. Was compliance can often feel like a moving target sometimes. From your perspective, what are maybe some of the biggest regulatory shifts companies are facing today, and how are you helping them stay ahead?
Well, I mean, let's look at I-9, for example. I mean, every administration rules kind of change a little bit, not necessarily the way you process, although you've seen I-9 since COVID, the rules have
Hmm.
changed a lot, right? First, oh yeah, you could do all this from home. Then, oh wait, we need a third party. And oh wait, never mind, we don't, Um, and so there was a lot of regulations, necessarily because a lot of government shut down. And then, you have a government shutdown right now. Well, what do we do if E-Verify wasn't working? These are things that would almost take up a full-time job for an HR person to monitor and measure. So I would say out of the 4 out of 5 or 6 major things I-9 has changed, now you have an administration change. So enforcement's gone up, right? So how does that affect me? Is there a potential audit coming down that wasn't necessarily probably a risk in the previous administration, right? And you see these things, and unemployment's the same way. Every state has their own different ways of doing things. They have the different ways of processing, different timelines, and different ways you have to respond. And if you're in a multi-location organization and trying to keep up with what South Carolina is doing versus what Georgia just did last week, again, that's a full-time job right there, much less having the technology to be able to process it, submit it, and monitor those claims timely.
100%. And like you said, a lot of companies still try to handle this manually or maybe even through disconnected vendors. And I guess my follow-up to that is, how does HR Logix bring these processes kind of together into one ecosystem?
Well, so with a lot of these processes to maintain compliance, we have to collect the same data sets, right? So
Hmm.
one of the advantages of using a single point and a single vendor is I'm only asking you for one data file on a lot of occasions, right?
Hmm.
So let's jump to tax credits for a second. I need to ask
Yeah.
questions specifically on some tax credits pre-hire. Kind of the same thing with I-9. As you're going through the hire process, we have to verify. So there's that pre-hire process, and a lot of that data we can collect to the same kind of survey. And so you're not using multiple vendors. And more importantly, as a new employee, I'm not having to jump to 18 different websites to be onboarded, which gives me a really bad taste in my mouth, to be honest with you. If I'm a new hire, I'm like, oh my God, how many vendors are going to have my information by the time I'm done with this? And then on the back end for like payroll data, we have to have payroll data to calculate death rates. We have to have payroll data for verification purposes, unemployment purposes. I mean, even if you go to large, vendors that are competitors of ours, in a lot of situations, because of acquisitions and different technology sets, you're a single employer having to submit 5 different files to a single vendor, and they're going to 5 different APIs or 5 different FTPs. And hell, you don't know sometimes if it got there. Was it received? Is it being calculated correctly? So I think one of the advantages we bring to the table is kind of the single source of truth, right? Of knowing whether or not you're in compliance and only needing one file to kind of, again, there's going to be off times and one-offs, so we're going to need additional information. But at the end of the day, I push one button, I upload it to one vendor, and I'm making sure they're doing their job.
100%. And there's also the security risk, right? Like if I have to send that to 5 different vendors, not only does it leave a bad taste in my mouth that I just gave them all that data, but also if it's not from one place going out, then it's getting spread between, like you said, 5 different APIs. And if one of them gets hacked, it's still the same data that went to the other 4, correct?
It's pretty scary not to know where your data's at, right? And a lot of times,
Right.
some companies are white labeling other systems, right? So you may think you're sending
Mm-hmm.
data to ABC company, but then they're actually submitting it off to someone else. And then in the case of data breaches, which we've seen, I'm not going to name any names here because I'm a good guy, but we've seen some pretty significant data breaches over the last few years, right? And it's
Right.
scary because you're like, hey, I know X company had a data breach, but how many people did they sell my data to?
Right.
Right? And an employee data especially, and you're seeing more states, start to crack down on things like there's this, swell of position and legally in the employee side of things where it's like, look, this is my data. It belongs to me. You have no right to sell it, all right? You have no right to transition or ship it off to these other people. A, without my notification, and B, God forbid you're even making monetary value off of it, right?
Right.
So I think too, a single source of truth. I always like to say as a CEO, I like to hire smart people and I like to let them do their jobs, but you got to have one neck to strangle, right? It's something, in
Right.
each department. So it's nice to be able to pick up the phone and call one neck and say, hey, what happened, right? Where am I at? What do I do?
Mhm. Of course. And
I'm not
I
suggesting anybody
understand.
start strangling necks and everything, but just
Yeah, no, I know. Totally understood that. And I know your platform isn't just software. There's also a strong managed human layer service on that brings a lot of expertise. Could you talk about how the combination of the technology with that human expertise kind of gives HR teams more confidence and peace of mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think, look, a lot of times, if you have a very large, complex HR department, you don't need to rely on our labor force to complete a lot of these compliance things. That's why we offer
Mhm.
our products as a SaaS, play. If you have a department, you understand how compliance works. Let's take unemployment, for example. Let's say you have unemployment attorneys on staff. You're a Fortune 500 company. You don't need our staff to do their job. You have a staff, right? But you need a technology that is
Mhm.
submitting to the states, timely, monitoring it, calculating the value of it. So these are things that you don't typically see, like the largest retailer in the country start building unemployment software. But in the case of a mid-sized company, a smaller company where you don't have that expertise on staff, that's when you rely on us to do like a full service, type of product positioning for you, where it's like, hey, you know what? You have an unemployment claim. Don't worry about it. Don't touch it. Send it to us. We'll take care of it. Our software will monitor it. We'll let you know the results at the end of the day. And we'll make sure you have all the reporting and everything that's needed to be compliant. I mean, our average leadership in this company with these types of tools is anywhere between 20 and 30 years. Combined
That's
leadership is
awesome.
over 200 years. So we have people that know what they're doing. They've done this for a very long time. They understand the laws, they understand the rules and regulations. We have attorneys on staff, CPAs, all the fun stuff, all the cool people to hang out with, right? Um, but there are times where you need us to be able to do that. And sometimes you just need great technology to do its job. And so that's why we kind of take both approaches is we want to be able to kind of not pigeonhole you to say you only have to do it this way, but be able to come up with something comprehensive to say when you need support, it's there, but when you just need the tech, it's also there.
Of course, of course. And I'd love to talk about some of the results that from your clients. Like what kind of impact are your clients seeing? Maybe that's reducing penalties, maybe improving just accuracy overall, or maybe even just saving time.
I mean, just start with the tax credit business. We've saved
Mhm.
billions of dollars. I mean, it's over $4 billion, over the last
Wow.
8 years, and what we've been able to do in the tax credit space. That's real cash that's going back into business. And the unemployment side, we have not only do we have the ability to lower unemployment tax rates, right, which also increases your bottom line because when you don't file timely, and then your tax rates go up, your effective SUTA tax rates go up, and so you're paying more on the tax side of things. Not only do we have the ability to do that, but just the fines alone from not filing correctly, not filing on time, we've saved hundreds of millions of dollars for our clients on that side of things. I read a study somewhere, and this was last year. I don't know how accurate it is. I don't think I've seen one since this year, but there was a study like in Florida. I think 40% of businesses overpay SUTA tax, and they have no
That's
idea.
insane.
Think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
So
big number.
that's a big number. And here's the thing about it. You can't rely on your HR person and your payroll person to know how to navigate SUTA tax, and their job is to perform the function that they're in. That's why experts need to come in and say, hey, guess what? You've been overpaying here. Here's the things that we can do to help you lower that effective rate and make sure your compliance and the fines are, mitigated.
100%. And that makes a lot of sense. And kind of switching a little bit growth wise, how are you getting HR Logix in front of the right decision makers? Are you seeing maybe more traction through partnerships, just like maybe direct outreach, or maybe a completely different channel?
I think it's a combination of all of it, but every business I've built, I've been in this industry a long time. I'm not going to age myself here, but we've kind of been through a couple of acquisitions and things, and we've acquired some companies. But one thing I've always got to use the 60/40 rule in business growth and revenue generation is I love for about 60% of our revenue to come off of our partnership relationships. So we build deep integrations with companies. We like to, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So we like to partner with
Mhm.
people who we have the same common goals or the same common, competitors. Um, and then, from the 40%, from the direct sales perspective, obviously you do the attending the trade show thing, right? You got to do that. Although we've seen this year, a lot of attendance and trade shows have been down this year from what we've seen. A little disappointing, but those things have ebbs and flows. So we've seen that. We're doing a lot of direct email. We don't do cold calling as much. We haven't seen it be as effective, but we think direct email,
Mhm.
a lot of specific and strategic ad placements on, relative like SHRM website and other periodicals and things like that. But that 60/40 rule has been pretty good for us. It's recruiting partners that want to do business with you, have the same goals in mind. They'll generate revenue for you, you generate revenue for them, and it lowers your effective cost of hiring a ton of salespeople too.
100%. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the conference side of things because I would completely agree with you. I was at the HR Tech event in Vegas a couple of months ago. And that was hearing the same thing from a lot of the attendees while I was walking around and seeing the booths. They're like, there's not a lot of buyers here. Like, this is like the lowest attendance, and it's expensive to go to those, right? So if
Yeah.
companies aren't getting a direct ROI from it, it can be tough.
Yeah, I've got some theories there. I think obviously economic, situations. Sometimes
Hmm.
businesses are now cutting back on those budgets because travel budgets are expensive, right? I mean,
Of
you're
course.
going to spend $10,000, $12,000 to go out to Vegas for a week, and how many ads could you have run or PPC could you have done on Google for that? But also too, I wasn't in the trade show this year, but I was there for a CEO roundtable. But we did have a booth. It's funny sometimes if you don't show up to these shows and you don't have a booth, they're like, "Oh my God, where are you? Did you got a business?" Like, nah, we just didn't want to spend 100 grand to go set up a
Right.
booth this year. Um, but also too, I think some things that need to happen in the HR industry as a whole is a pattern of we're doing the same thing every year in the same city, right? And a lot of times these HR leads of HR, heads of HR are seeing the same product show up every single year, right? You have your little startup
Hmm.
pavilion, and there's some exciting things there. But I think it probably wouldn't hurt some of these shows, maybe. And I'm not trying to, you know, speak negatively of anything, but maybe HR Tech or Sherm, maybe look at a different venues, every once in a while. It's been in Vegas forever,
Right.
and I just think that start something fresh. Maybe bring it to the East Coast, right? Because you're in Birmingham, Alabama. Getting to Vegas is not a direct shoot a lot of times, right?
No.
So I think maybe that would help a little bit too. But I think as AI maybe picks up and there's some new and exciting products out there, maybe that'll help attendance a little bit. But to us, we go to those shows for partnerships. and to build relationships, we're really not counting on a ton of revenue from this.
100%. And I think you made a good point too. You can still go to the shows and not buy the $50,000 booth. I think the booth next to one of us shared that they spend almost $250,000 in total on that booth, right? Like,
Yeah.
so.
It'd be nice to have that kind of budget for sure, but I don't
Right.
think I was spending on that. So
No, I wouldn't either. But my next question for you is, as a CEO, you're leading both the strategic and operational sides of the business. What does your typical day to look like? How do you balance that?
well, I mean, now in the new world, it's basically being married to Zoom. But no, I try to be pretty regimented, especially considering HR Logix. We have so many different division lines, and so a lot of my day is spent, operationally, right, on things. But I'm a pretty regimented guy. I get up in the morning, I do my workout, my Tai Chi, whatever I got to do to get moving, and then I'll hit my emails from about 8 to 10, and then it's just really operational meetings. We're releasing product all the time. We're releasing enhancements. Laws are changing. So we're constantly in meetings that are more operationally and strategically focused on new product development. Again, I've got great leaders in every one of these teams, so I trust them to do their job. So I'm not necessarily meeting with them all the time, but I also believe that the biggest evangelist in the company has to be the CEO. And so I'm always constantly talking to potential partners, just building relationships, even with competitors, finding out what's going on in the market, what they're seeing. And that's mainly what my afternoon looks like is what can I do? What podcast can I get on? What, who can I pick up the phone and call? That's an old buddy in the industry saying, hey man, what are you seeing? What are you guys doing that's working for you strategically? And kind of bringing that vision, back to the organization and then making sure that our leaders underneath me are executing on that vision.
100%. And I think the other half of the leaders executing is making sure that there's no blockers, right? That's something that we've heard on the podcast a lot is that if the leaders aren't vocal underneath the CEO, it can potentially damage timelines for things, especially in product releases, as you're talking about. If there's a huge line of products and you need a new feature or something like that, blocker could very much disable that leader from making the right decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we entrust our teams to do their jobs. And I always say, you've heard this before, ask for forgiveness, not for permission, right? But I also
Hmm.
believe, as a CEO, this is the best advice I could give any up and coming CEO. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're the dumbest person in the room, right? So
Hmm.
find people who do what they do really good, that you can trust to do their job. Let them do their job. Stay out of their way, because you can become the biggest blocker. Micromanagement
Right.
from an executive level is the biggest blocker of growth in an organization.
Definitely. And as the HR tech space is evolving fast, obviously with AI and automation and even the regulations we talked about earlier, what kind of trends are you watching closely that will maybe shape the future of compliance and workforce management overall?
Well, I'm watching a lot of the legal trends right now. I think there's been a lot of jumping of the gun a little bit on AI right now because we don't really.
Hmm.
Yeah, you've seen some lawsuits. There's some very large lawsuits right now when it comes to
Of
hiring
course.
decisions made by maybe some AI bots and some things like that. Again, I'm not going to point out any specific lawsuit, but I think there's sometimes a rush to be the first to market with things, not necessarily really taking time to understand the implications of being the first to market.
Hmm.
I would not want to be the first person who ever tried to build a house and live in that house, right? I would have probably
Right.
seen other people test that before I moved into that house. So I think what we need to do as an HR tech industry is let's kind of take a breath and see where the legal side of this lands, right? Like what the Department of Labor is going to say is acceptable when it comes to AI. I mean, the Trump administration is changing all kinds of rules right now with AI and acceptability of uses and
Mhm.
use cases, and now you've got states that are coming out. Like New York and California saying you cannot use this for X, Y, Z, right? We're
Right.
absolutely going to hammer you if you do that. And then you've got the employees and applicants starting to figure that out, feel discriminated against. Um, there are things that I think we can do. Like it's a data play for me. It's easier to access data through AI, right? It's the
Hmm.
source of truth, reporting. Um, those are things that I think HR teams should be taking advantage of right now. But I certainly would not want to be, I don't feel comfortable making a legal determination, especially with something as important as hiring, payroll, discrimination, and let AI, handle that. I'm certainly not going to have Chat GPT write my next operating agreement anytime soon.
Of course, of course. And I think that's where a lot of people that we've talked to kind of sit right now is they know that it's important, but they want to let everyone test it out first. And also just from a compliance standpoint, right? Especially in HR, that's so huge. Um, but looking a little bit ahead, what's next for HR Logix over the next 6 to 12 months? Are there any new product launches, partnerships, or initiatives you're really excited about?
Well, we have two really exciting product launches coming up in the first quarter. I really can't get much into them because one of them will
Of
be
course.
unlike anything that's in the market. But I will say there is AI components to all of it. But again, not in any kind of way that's going to determine compliance or make any kind of decisions there. So we continue to grow. It's interesting in this world that we live in because we want to create better products, but in the compliance space, our better products have to be focused on the legal side of compliance, right? So we're
Of
restricted
course.
on things we can do. I mean, if it were up to me, man, my IT team would kill me if it weren't for the laws surrounding a lot of what we do. Because I'd be like, "What if we did this?" And they'd be like, "Well, that's not legal." And I'm like, "But it'd be cool," you know. So and I would constantly just have them releasing new products every single day. But yeah, I mean, we continue to grow as an organization in our internal products. We try to make ourselves more compliant every single day. There are things we can use AI for research and some things like that. But what we're always doing, I'll give you an example. If we want to research a new tax credit that got passed in the state of Arizona, AI is great for that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, I'm going to hand it to a CPA who works in my organization. I'm like, all right, tell me whether or not this is legal or not, right? Um,
Hmm.
so, we're constantly in that growth mode. But more importantly, if we do our jobs, we do our jobs well, and we keep our clients compliant, they're gonna spread the word, and that's what we're seeing right now. Is people want to get back to service a little bit. Technology is
Hmm.
important, but people want to know that their job is safe. They're making decisions that are smart for the organization, and so our focus needs to be there first, and pretty shiny logos and new products second. But check with me in January. I think you're going to be blown away about something we're releasing in January. In fact, I had a town hall meeting with my staff today, and I actually told majority of my staff it's kind of been a secret project about it today, and some
Hmm.
heads were exploding in a good way. So,
That's awesome. I'll definitely keep an eye out. But my last question for you, Shannon, is for anyone who's listening who wants to learn more about HR Logix or connect with your team or you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
so really just through our website or through LinkedIn, hrlogix.com. It's Logics, not X. Sometimes that gets confusing. um, Through our website or through LinkedIn. I mean, we've got a great staff that'll return questions or information. And listen, even if you're not looking to buy, even if you have compliance questions, that's what we're here for. I guarantee you'll find somebody here that's willing to help you through any kind of sticky situation that you may be in. Because this whole compliance space is about leaning on each other, doing the right thing every single day. And I think we've built that kind of culture and organization. So we just look forward to the conversations, and that's the best way to get a hold of it.
Awesome. I will leave the links to the HR Logix website as well as their LinkedIn in the description. I highly recommend checking them out and the incredible work they're doing to make compliance simpler, safer, and smarter. But Shannon, thank you so much for your time and insights today. And we will see you guys on the next podcast.